An old woman steps closer through the murmuring crowd. Her voice is steady, almost tender. "Hey son, you have my eyes." Daniel freezes, breath caught. The noise fades, leaving only the weight of her words. The late afternoon sun spills over the glass facade of the new children's hospital, catching on the ribbon stretched across its front steps. A soft breeze carries the scent of fresh paint and blooming jasmine from the planters lining the walkway. Daniel Hart stands at the podium, his polished shoes planted firmly on the temporary stage. The microphone hums faintly as he leans in, offering a measured smile to the rows of guests, city officials and reporters. His navy suit fits flawlessly, the silk tie knotted with precision. The golden scissors rest on a small velvet-draped table beside him, gleaming in the light like they belong in a museum. He's halfway through thanking the donors when his gaze catches on a still figure in the crowd. An elderly woman, 3 rows back, stands without shifting, her hands folded neatly over a worn leather handbag. She isn't clapping or smiling like the others. Her expression is unreadable, but her eyes, sharp and unwavering, hold on to his in a way that makes him lose his place for the briefest second. A cough from somewhere in the audience brings him back. He clears his throat, finishing his sentence as though nothing happened, but a small tightness remains in his chest. The air is filled with a gentle murmur, people adjusting in their chairs, a photographer changing lenses, a child whispering to her father. Daniel hears it all in fragments, the way one might hear the sea from inside a house with the windows closed. And then something small cuts through it. "Excuse me, mister," a voice says, barely loud enough to carry. He glances down from the podium. A boy, maybe 7, has stepped forward past the row of seated guests. His sneakers are untied, the laces flopping against the pavement. In his hands, he holds a crumpled drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands beneath a sun with wide yellow rays. "Is this your hospital?" the boy asks. His voice is clear, without hesitation. Daniel looks at the drawing, then at the boy's expectant face. "It's for you," he says quietly, "and kids like you." The boy studies him for a moment, then smiles, a small, knowing smile that feels older than it should. "Then you must be a good man," he says, before turning and walking back to his seat. Something in Daniel shifts, almost imperceptibly, like a door opening just enough for a sliver of light to get through. He returns his attention to the crowd, finishing his remarks, but his mind keeps circling back to the boy's words. As the applause swells, he steps to the velvet-covered table, fingers brushing the cool metal of the scissors. The moment feels rehearsed, like the hundreds of other public events he's attended. Yet the air feels different now, less like ceremony, more like a threshold. He positions the scissors over the ribbon, cameras rise like a tide, the blades close with a crisp snip, and the ribbon flutters to the ground in 2 perfect halves. Applause bursts forth, layered with the clicking of shutters. Out of the corner of his eye, Daniel sees her again. The old woman hasn't moved, hasn't clapped. Her gaze is still fixed on him, as steady as it was when he first noticed her. The mayor approaches, clapping him on the back, murmuring something about the hospital's legacy. Daniel nods automatically, but the woman's presence has become an anchor in the back of his mind, holding him in a quiet place that doesn't match the noise around him. When the formalities end, guests begin to drift toward the refreshments. The scent of fresh coffee mingles with the sweetness of lemon tarts being carried on silver trays. A jazz trio plays softly near the steps, their notes weaving through the chatter. Daniel moves toward the edge of the crowd, scanning for her. She stands in the same place, sunlight touching the silver in her hair. The cuffs of her coat are frayed, the hem uneven, but there's nothing tentative in her stance. As he draws closer, the surrounding sounds seem to fade. The air feels cooler here, as though he's stepped into a different moment entirely. Her eyes meet his deep-set, clear and startlingly familiar. She takes a small step forward, the leather of her handbag creaks softly as she shifts her grip. Her voice, when it comes, is low but steady. "Hey son," she says, the words falling with the weight of something long carried. Daniel freezes. For a heartbeat, everything stops. The music, the clinking glasses, even the warmth of the sun. He feels the scissors handle still warm in his palm, though he knows he set them down minutes ago. Her words echo, quiet yet unshakable, settling somewhere deep inside him where logic can't reach. And just like that, the ceremony is no longer about the building behind him, or the crowd before him. It's about the question now rising in his chest, the one he doesn't yet know how to ask. The ceremony winds down into a gentler hum, people sipping coffee from delicate porcelain cups, clusters of guests forming loose circles of conversation. A breeze rolls in from the street, carrying the faint smell of rain on warm pavement. Daniel moves through it all like someone walking underwater. He tells himself to focus on the donors, the mayor, the photo opportunities still waiting, but the old woman's words keep threading through his mind. You have my eyes. The syllables feel strange, weighted, as though they were spoken in a room where no one else could hear. He spots her again, now closer to the edge of the courtyard. She isn't looking at the food or the musicians or the speeches still droning from the podium, she's watching him. Not in the way fans or journalists do, hungry for a reaction. Her gaze is steady, unblinking, the way someone might look at a photograph they've studied 1,000 times. Daniel finds himself drifting in her direction, weaving between waiters with trays of smoked salmon and glasses of sparkling water. He's halfway there when something small interrupts him. A little girl, no more than 5, tugs at the cuff of his suit jacket. She holds a single red balloon, the ribbon tangled around her fingers. Her hair smells faintly of strawberries, and her dress is patterned with tiny suns. Are you the man who made this place? She asks, tilting her head back to meet his eyes. Daniel hesitates. I helped build it, yes. She nods, satisfied, then presses the balloon string into his hand. Then you should keep this. My mom says people who give good things should have something bright. Before he can answer, she skips away toward the refreshment table, leaving him holding the balloon, the ribbon soft against his palm. He glances toward the old woman again, and for the briefest moment, something changes in her expression. The corners of her mouth lift, not into a full smile, but into something warmer, more alive. The balloon bobs lightly in the air beside him. He can feel its gentle pull, almost in rhythm with the pull he feels toward her. When he reaches her, they're close enough that he can see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her coat smells faintly of soap and rain. I didn't mean to startle you, she says, her voice low, but I had to speak. Daniel studies her face. Do I know you? Her gaze holds his. You knew me once. It's such an odd answer that he almost laughs, but something in her tone keeps him still. From somewhere behind them, a man Sepp's voice calls, Daniel, we need you for the group photo. He doesn't move. If this is some kind of story. It's Sepp's not a story, she interrupts gently. It's Sepp's the truth. I was there when you were small. I Sepp been looking for you for a very long time. Her words settle in the space between them. Daniel's fingers tighten slightly on the balloon ribbon, the red sphere trembling in the air. He's about to ask what she means when a cluster of donors sweeps in, congratulating him, shaking his hand. The woman steps back, folding into the edges of the crowd as though she's been practicing it for years. By the time the group photo is finished, she's nowhere in sight. But the feeling remains, that sense of being pulled towards something he can't name, the echo of a voice from somewhere he thought was gone. He looks down at the balloon still in his hand. The ribbon has curled slightly from the humidity, catching the light like a silver thread. Somewhere beyond the music, beyond the polished speeches and staged smiles, she's waiting. And he knows, without understanding why, that this isn't the last time they'll speak. The limousine door shuts with a soft, padded click, sealing Daniel into a cocoon of leather and quiet. The driver asks if they should head straight to the office, but Daniel doesn't answer right away. He's still watching the hospital entrance, through the tinted glass, scanning for a glimpse of her. Rain has started, light and fine, making the pavement shimmer under the street lamps. Guests hurry to their cars, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers. The old woman is nowhere among them. Sir, the driver prompts. Daniel leans back. Office, he says finally, though his voice sounds distracted even to himself. The car pulls away from the curb, the hospital receding into the blur of rain. He rests the red balloon against his knee, its ribbon wrapped loosely around his fingers. He should hand it to his assistant to deal with later, but he doesn't. At a red light, something catches his eye, a small bakery on the corner, its windows glowing warm against the gray evening. Without thinking, he taps the divider glass. Stop here. The driver hesitates. Here, sir. Yes. The smell of fresh bread and sugar greets him as he steps inside. The shop is nearly empty, just the hum of a refrigerator case and the clink of a spoon in a coffee cup. Behind the counter, a young woman with flour-dusted hands smiles. "Cold out there, what can I get you?" Daniel orders a black coffee. As she turns to pour it, the bell above the door jingles. He doesn't need to look up. He feels it before he sees her. The old woman steps in, brushing a few drops of rain from her coat. She glances around the shop, her eyes finding him instantly, like she expected him to be here. He straightens in his seat. "You followed me?" She shakes her head, moving toward the counter. "No, I come here every Thursday." The young woman at the register greets her by name Margaret, and hands her a paper bag without asking what she wants. Margaret turns toward Daniel Sepp's table. "Mind if I sit?" He hesitates, then gestures to the chair across from him. The coffee between them sends up slow, curling steam. For a moment, neither speaks. Rain taps gently against the window. "I know this is strange," she says finally, "but I recognized you the moment I saw you, not from your speeches or the papers, from before." Daniel watches her closely. "Before what?" She studies his face the way one might study an old photograph that has been folded and refolded. "Before you were Daniel Heart, CEO, when you were just Danny Boy." The name hits him like the sudden drop of an elevator. His hand tightens on the balloon ribbon without meaning to. "No one calls me that anymore," he thinks, but doesn't say it aloud. Margaret Sepp's eyes soften. "You were small, you had a scrape on your knee from falling off your bike. You cried, and I told you to be brave, that your mother would be proud." His chest tightens. He's about to ask how she could know that, but the bell above the door rings again. A boy walks in, drenched from the rain, holding a broken umbrella. He looks around, spots a coin on the floor, and picks it up with a grin. "Lucky day," he says to no one in particular. Daniel finds himself watching the boy's wet shoes leave small dark prints across the tile. Something about it makes him think of a night long ago, muddy footprints on a kitchen floor, and a woman, maybe his mother, laughing softly instead of scolding. When he looks back at Margaret, she Sepp's watching him with that same steady gaze. "I think," she says quietly, "you Sepp been searching for something you didn't know was missing." Daniel doesn't answer. The coffee has gone lukewarm, but he doesn't reach for it. Outside, the rain begins to ease, leaving the street shining under the lamplight. He has the odd feeling that something has shifted, not a dramatic turning point, just a small click, like a lock sliding open. Margaret stands, her paper bag held close. "I still see you again, Danny boy." He watches her leave, the red balloon still bobbing gently beside him, its ribbon curling over his hand. Daniel doesn't usually linger in his office after events. He prefers to keep his public appearances neatly separated from his private work, like compartments in a safe. But tonight, the compartments feel cracked. The red balloon rests in the corner, tethered to a brass coat stand. It drifts slightly in the air-conditioned breeze, the ribbon twisting like it's thinking of coming loose. He's supposed to be reviewing a report, a merger proposal his board has been pushing for weeks, but the words blur on the page. Instead, his mind keeps circling back to the old woman's voice in the bakery, the way she said Danny boy like it was the most natural thing in the world. By the time the city lights burn fully against the dark, he's scrolling through the company's security photos from the hospital opening. He tells himself it's to check for press shots he might approve, but he's really looking for her. He finds her in 3 frames. In each she's standing the same way, shoulders slightly back, chin level, eyes fixed on him as though nothing else in the scene matters. On impulse, he sends the images to a private investigator he occasionally uses for due diligence checks. The reply is quick. No obvious records, no fixed address, no driver's license under the name Margaret that matches her description. Likely renting under a different name. The vagueness unsettles him more than it should. He leans back in his chair, fingers steepled. The city outside hums with late traffic, the sound muted through glass. Somewhere below, a siren wails briefly, and then fades. The quiet is interrupted by a soft knock on the door. His assistant Clara steps in holding a folder. "These are the revised numbers. Do you want them tonight?" She stops, her gaze landing on the balloon in the corner. "What's Sepp's with that?" He glances over. "Gift from a donor," he says. though the word feels wrong in his mouth. Clara smiles faintly, not your usual style, but it suits the room. After she leaves, he sits in the dim lamplight, thinking about the bakery, about her eyes. How they didn't just look at him, but through him. The next morning he returns to the hospital, without the usual entourage. The corridors smell faintly of antiseptic, and warm paper from the printers at the nurse's station. Children's laughter filters from the playroom, mingled with the beep of a distant monitor. He finds her on the garden terrace, sitting on a wooden bench beneath a climbing vine of late-blooming roses. The paper bag from the bakery is beside her, folded neatly shut. "You came back," she says, not looking surprised. "I had questions," Daniel replies. Margaret pats the bench beside her, "Then sit." He does, the wood warm from the sun. For a while they listen to the breeze rustling through the vines. Somewhere below a child is singing softly to themselves. She speaks first. "I knew your mother, we lived in the same building, I used to watch you when she worked late. You liked apples, always asked for slices, never whole ones, said whole ones, made your hands sticky." Daniel stares at her. The detail is too precise, too small to be invented. "Why didn't said I remember you? You were young." And then she was gone. The air feels heavier. He doesn't press her for details, though a part of him wants to. "I wanted to keep you," Margaret says quietly, "but I didn't set have the means. You were taken to relatives far away. I thought I said to never see you again." He watches her hands as she speaks. They're steady, but her fingers curl slightly against her knees, as though holding on to something invisible. "Why now?" he asks, finally. "I heard your name years ago in an article. I saw your picture, but I wasn't set sure. Today I was sure." The wind shifts, bringing the faint scent of roses and something older like soap from another decade. He looks down at the gravel beneath his shoes.
"You called me Sunsap."
She meets his gaze, "Because I loved you like one, and because you have my eyes." For a moment, the world narrows to the sound of the breeze, the murmur of the hospital behind them, and the quiet weight of her words. A nurse steps out to water the plants, nodding politely to them before moving on. The ordinary motion of it grounds him, even as something inside feels unmoored. Margaret stands, smoothing her coat. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know." He doesn't stop her when she walks away, but he knows without entirely deciding that he will see her again. The following week unfolds with its usual precision: board meetings, investor calls, dinners in muted restaurants, where the tablecloths are always white and the wine list is always thick. On paper, everything moves forward as it should, but in Daniel's mind, something drags. Margaret's words keep returning, not as an echo but as a steady, persistent knock. "You have my eyes." He tells himself it was just sentiment, the kind of thing older people say when they want to feel connected. Yet the more he thinks about it, the less casual it seems. By Thursday afternoon, he's in his office, the city stretching pale and glassy beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. He's on a call with the legal team, when his gaze drifts to the corner, where the red balloon still sways gently. Its ribbon has curled more since last week, the color a little dimmer now. "Daniel, are you with us?" A voice from the speakerphone asks. "Yes," he says, though the answer feels automatic, disconnected from the conversation. At lunch, he steps out onto the balcony with a cup of black coffee. Below, the streets shimmer with early spring rain. A bicycle bell rings faintly, followed by a burst of laughter from pedestrians huddling under umbrellas. He takes a slow sip, watching the steam curl into the cool air. Something ordinary catches his eye across the street, in front of the small flower shop he passes nearly every day. An older woman in a worn coat is arranging buckets of daffodils. For a second, he swears it's Margaret. The tilt of the head, the curve of the shoulders, it's enough to make his fingers tighten around the coffee cup. When the woman turns, he sees it's someone else entirely. The tension in his hand eases, but the image lingers. That evening, he has dinner with a potential partner from Tokyo. They're halfway through the second course, when the man mentions his grandmother raising him after his parents died. "She had this way of remembering the smallest things," the man says, with a faint smile. "Made me feel like I'd never been forgotten." Daniel hears himself say, "That's rare," and realizes he means it more than he expected. Later he walks home instead of taking the car. the air damp and smelling faintly of rain on asphalt. Passing the bakery from the other night, he slows. Through the fog glass, he sees the same young woman at the counter, dusting her hands with flour. For a moment he half expects Margaret to step in, paper bag in hand. She does instead. Inside his apartment, the quiet feels heavier than usual. The red balloon, which he brought home without really deciding to, hovers near the bookshelf. He thinks about untying it, letting it drift to the ceiling, but leaves it where it is. On Saturday he stops by the hospital unannounced. He tells himself it's to check on the new facilities, but as he walks the corridors, his eyes keep drifting to corners, benches, and the garden terrace. There's no sign of her. In the children's playroom, a little boy is building a tower of wooden blocks. The structure leans dangerously, and Daniel finds himself crouching down beside him. "That one needs support," Daniel says, pointing to a block near the base. The boy glances up. "My grandma says you can build something tall without making the bottom strong first." Daniel smiles faintly. She steps right. They work together to straighten the base before the boy adds another block. It's such a simple thing, yet as Daniel stands to leave, he feels a small steady warmth in his chest, like a memory trying to surface. Back in his car, he sits for a moment before starting the engine. The hospital entrance gleams in the late afternoon sun. Somewhere Margaret is living a life he knows nothing about, and for reasons he can't explain, the not knowing is starting to matter. The hospital's garden terrace smells faintly of wet soil and roses after a morning shower. Daniel stands just inside the doorway, scanning the benches. He's been coming here more often lately, always without an official reason, but this is the first time in weeks he's actually seen her. Margaret is sitting under the vine-covered pergola, her handbag beside her. She's feeding small pieces of bread to a sparrow that hops near her shoes. Her coat, the same worn one he remembers, has a frayed thread dangling from the sleeve. He crosses the terrace quietly, the gravel crunching under his shoes. She looks up before he reaches her. "I was wondering when you said come," she says. "I've been looking," he admits. She pats the bench next to her. "Then sit. It's better to talk than to search." He sits, the wood warm from the midday sun. A nurse passes through the garden with a watering can, nodding politely before disappearing through the side gate. The scent of the roses drifts between them. "You said you knew my mother," Daniel begins. Margaret nods. "I did. We lived across the hall. She was kind, always tired, always working, but she loved you fiercely." He waits, letting the silence invite more. "One night," she says slowly, "she didn't come home. I didn't know what to do, so I kept you with me. We waited 2 days before someone from the city came. They told me she was gone. Accident. Quick." Daniel feels the words settle in his chest, like cold stones. "I wanted to keep you," she continues, "but I didn't have the means. No family of my own, no steady job. They sent you to relatives in another state. I never stopped thinking about you." He studies her profile, the curve of her jaw, the lines etched deep at the corners of her mouth. "Why tell me this now?" "Because you should know where you came from," she says simply. "And because I wanted you to know, you weren't set alone then." "Not completely." A sparrow flutters to the back of the bench, tilting its head as if listening. Daniel follows its small movements. His thoughts nodded. From somewhere across the garden, a child's laugh cuts through the stillness. A girl in a hospital gown is pushing a toy stroller along the path, her thin legs moving carefully. She stops when she sees them. "Do you like roses?" she calls. Margaret smiles at her, very much. The girl picks one from a low branch, walks over, and places it in Margaret's hand before hurrying away again. Margaret turns the flower slowly, its petals soft against her fingertips. "Life has a way of giving you small kindness when you least expect them," she says. Daniel looks at her, the faint scent of the rose mingling with the memory of lavender soap that's been haunting him since they met. He doesn't remember her exactly, but he believes her, and believing her feels like standing at the edge of something he can't yet see the bottom of. "You said you has been looking for me," he says. "How?" Her mouth curves into a faint smile. "Old friends. Bits of news. I saw your picture once in a magazine, but I wasn't sure until that day at the hospital." "Why were you there?" "I volunteer," she says simply. I read to the children. It makes the days lighter. The honesty in her voice makes him glance away, as if holding her gaze too long might expose something in himself. A breeze moves through the terrace, and the sparrow takes off in a small burst of wings. Margaret sets the rose on the bench between them. "Sep's not here to pull you back into the past," she says. "I just wanted you to know Sep's there if you ever need it." He doesn't answer right away. The sound of the fountain trickles softly in the background, blending with the faint rustle of leaves. When he finally stands, he notices the rose still lying between them. He picks it up, holds it for a moment, then offers it back to her. "Keep it," he says. She tucks it into her handbag without looking at him. "You still find your way, Danny boy." As he walks away, he feels the weight of her words, not heavy but steady, like a compass settling in the right direction. The next time Daniel sees Margaret, the hospital garden is quiet, its benches damp from an early morning rain. Clouds drift low over the city, muting the sunlight into a soft gray glow. She's seated beneath the pergola again, a thermos resting beside her, steam curling from its open lid. He sits without needing an invitation this time. The wood is cool beneath him, still holding the night's chill. "You were about to tell me," he says, "about the day they took me." Margaret nods slowly, her hands are clasped in her lap, the knuckles pale. "It was cold," she begins. "Late autumn. You had a little red sweater with one button missing at the top. I remember thinking I should fix it before you caught a chill." The image settles in his mind, a small boy in a sweater, his collar uneven. "They came in the morning," she continues. "Two people from the city, they spoke kindly, but their words were final. I tried to argue, to explain that I could care for you, but they had their orders. They said your relatives had already agreed." Her gaze drifts to the gravel path as though she Sep's watching the moment replay. "You were eating toast. You didn't understand. When they took your hand you looked back at me and cried. I told you I Sep's find you again. That Sep's the last thing I said." Daniel feels the quiet between them deepen. In his mind, there's no clear memory of that day, only a faint ache, like something pressed into him, so young it became part of his bones. Before he can speak, movement catches his eye. A boy in a hospital gown is slowly making his way along the path, one hand trailing along the vine-covered wall. He pauses near the fountain, watching the water trickle. Margaret smiles faintly. "That Sep's Jamie, he Sep's here most afternoons," says. The fountain sounds like music. As if on cue, the boy calls over. It steps like a song with no words. Daniel nods to him. It is. The boy grins, then continues on his slow walk, the hem of his gown swaying with each step. Margaret watches him until he disappears around the corner. "I used to walk you like that," she says quietly. "Around the block when your mother worked late. You liked looking at the lights in other people's windows." Daniel swallows, the image slotting into place beside the sweater and the toast. They're small, almost ordinary details, but together they form something that feels like truth. "Why didn't set you right?" he asks. "I didn't know where you were. They wouldn't tell me. I sent letters to the city office, but I don't know if they ever reached your relatives." A breeze stirs the damp petals of the roses overhead, their scent faint in the cool air. Daniel finds himself staring at the drops of water clinging to the edges, each one catching a fragment of light. "I don't remember much from then," he admits. "That Sep's all right," she says. "I remember enough for both of us." They sit in silence for a while, the fountain's steady rhythm filling the space between words. Somewhere above, a bird shifts in the vines, scattering a few droplets onto the bench. One lands on the back of Daniel's hand, cold, quick, and gone in an instant. Margaret sips from her thermos. "You done well for yourself," she says. "Your mother would be proud." The words make something in his chest tighten, but it's not unpleasant, more like a knot beginning to loosen. When he finally stands to leave, she doesn't try to hold him. "I'll be here next week," she says, as if it's already decided. He nods, but as he walks away he realizes it is decided, though not by her alone. The afternoon light slants low through Daniel's office windows, softening the edges of the city skyline. He's supposed to be reviewing quarterly reports, but the numbers blur into meaningless columns. His mind keeps wandering back to the garden, to Margaret's voice, to the boy who said the fountain sounded like music. He pushes the papers aside and leans back in his chair. Outside, the streets are busy, but from up here the noise is muted, almost like watching a silent film. A knock interrupts his thoughts. Clara steps in holding a small envelope. "This came for you, no return address." Daniel takes it, the paper rough under his fingertips. Inside is a single photograph, black and white, edges curled with age. It's him as a boy, maybe 5 or 6, wearing a sweater with one button missing. A woman's hand rests lightly on his shoulder, just visible at the edge of the frame. There sips no note, but he knows. The next morning he's back at the hospital. The garden is quieter than usual, the air warm and still. Margaret is there, of course, her handbag beside her, reading aloud from a worn children's book to a little girl in a wheelchair. He stays back, watching. The girl's face shifts from concentration to laughter, as Margaret changes her voice for the characters. A nurse comes to wheel the girl away, and she waves goodbye with both hands. Only then does Margaret glance up. "You came earlier than I expected," she says. "I got something in the mail," he replies, holding out the photograph. Her expression softens. "That was your mother Sake's hand, I took the picture." He sits beside her, the wooden bench, warm from the sun. "Why now? Why send it?" "I wanted you to see yourself before the world told you who to be," she says. "To remember that you were someone before all this." She gestures lightly toward his suit, his polished shoes, the guarded lines in his posture. Before he can answer, a boy Sep's voice calls from across the garden. "Margaret, the pigeons are back." She chuckles. "Excuse me." He watches her cross to the far side of the terrace, where 2 boys are scattering birdseed. She kneels to help them, her movements easy, unhurried. The pigeons flock closer, their wings flashing white and gray in the sunlight. From where he sits, it's such a simple scene, an old woman, a couple of boys, a scattering of seed, but it holds something he can't quite name. Warmth, maybe. Or a kind of patience he's never had. When she returns, she steps brushing crumbs from her skirt. "You were like that," she says, "always stopping for the smallest things. A flower, in a crack, a shiny coin on the sidewalk. Your mother loved that about you." Daniel feels the words settle somewhere deeper than memory. "I'm not sure I've been that person in a long time," he says. "Maybe not," she replies, "but that doesn't mean he's gone." They sit in silence, the sound of pigeons cooing faintly in the background. For the first time in years, Daniel doesn't feel the need to check his watch. The days that follow are different, not in any grand cinematic way, but in small, almost invisible adjustments. Daniel starts walking to the office, instead of taking the car when the weather is good. He notices the flower shop across from his building, how the daffodils lean toward the morning light. He even stops once to buy a bunch, surprising the owner, who says he's never seen him inside before. Meetings feel different too. When a department head suggests cutting a community outreach program to save money, Daniel finds himself shaking his head before the numbers are even presented. "We still keep it," he says. "We can trim somewhere else." In the evenings, instead of going straight home, he sometimes visits the hospital garden. Margaret is always there, sometimes reading to the children, sometimes just sitting quietly, watching the fountain. They don't always talk, sometimes he just sits with her, the stillness between them as easy as the conversations. One afternoon, as they share a bench, a young mother in worn jeans approaches. Her little boy clings shyly to her leg, holding a paper bag. "We wanted to thank you," she says to Daniel, her voice soft but steady, "for the hospital. My son, he's getting better because of it." Daniel doesn't know what to say at first. He looks at the boy who steps peeking up at him from behind his mother's hand. "You are welcome," he says finally. "I'm glad you are here." The boy steps forward, offering the bag. Inside is a single chocolate chip cookie, slightly misshapen but still warm. He takes it, smiling. "Best gift I've had all week." Margaret watches, her eyes warm, and something in her gaze makes him realize she's seeing more than just a moment, she's seeing a change. That night, back in his apartment, he pulls out the photograph she sent him. The little boy in the sweater looks back at him, with an openness he's not sure he's felt in years. He thinks of the programs his company cut over the years in the name of efficiency, the relationships he let fade because they didn't serve a purpose. He calls his CFO. I want to set up a fund, he says, for foster families. Housing, education, whatever they need to keep kids out of the system. Under the company SEP's name, the CFO asks. No, Daniel says after a pause, quietly. The next time he sees Margaret, she's in the garden with a stack of books. He tells her about the fund in a few simple words, not expecting praise. She doesn't give it, but she smiles in a way that feels like more. You stare finding your way, she says. It's not redemption in a grand sweeping gesture, it's in the steady deliberate choice to be different, and the quiet understanding that someone is there to see it. The train ride is quiet, the landscape shifting from glass towers and crowded streets to stretches of open fields and clusters of low brick houses. Daniel sits by the window, the rhythm of the wheels steady beneath them. Across from him, Margaret holds her handbag in her lap, her fingers resting lightly on the clasp. She hasn't said much, and neither has he, but the silence feels full rather than empty. When the train slows into the station, the platform comes into view, paint chipped on the railings, the clock above the entrance frozen at the wrong time. It's exactly as he half remembers. The air smells faintly of damp earth and wood smoke as they step down. They walk through streets where the houses lean slightly, their paint faded from years of sun. Margaret leads the way, her steps unhurried. Now and then, she points to something, an old bakery that's changed owners but still bakes the same bread, a corner where a street lamp always flickered in winter. They turn down a narrow lane lined with hedges, and Daniel stops. Ahead is a small two-story building with peeling white paint. The windows are different now, but the doorway is the same. This was our building, Margaret says quietly. You and your mother lived upstairs, I was just across the hall. Daniel steps closer, running his hand lightly over the doorframe. The wood is rough beneath his fingertips, the grain rising where the paint has worn away. He closes his eyes for a moment, and there's a flicker. Warm light spilling from a kitchen, the faint smell of toast, a voice humming in the next room. They don't go inside, the place belongs to someone else now, but he stands there long enough to feel the shape of the memory settle into him. From there, Margaret takes him to a small park at the edge of town. The swings creak in the breeze, and the grass is patchy in places, but it's quiet. She sits on a bench, and he joins her. I used to bring you here, she says. You run straight to the fountain and try to catch the water in your hands. Daniel smiles faintly. Sounds like me. They sit for a while, the air cool against their skin. A boy rides past on a bicycle, his laughter trailing behind him. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks, then falls silent. Finally, they walk to the cemetery on the hill. The path is uneven, the grass damp from a morning rain. They stop in front of a simple headstone, his mother's name etched in stone, the letters softened by time. Daniel stands still, his hands in his pockets. For a moment, the rest of the world fades, the distant traffic, the rustle of trees, even Margaret at his side. He thinks of the photo, the sweater, the toast, the walks around the block. He thinks of all the years he spent without knowing these small, unremarkable truths. I found my way back, Mom, he says quietly. Beside him, Margaret's eyes shine, but she doesn't speak. She just rests her hand briefly on his arm, the touch light but steady. When they leave the cemetery, the sun is breaking through the clouds. They walk back toward the station together, the air warmer now, carrying the scent of cut grass. It's not the home he remembers. He doesn't remember much of it at all, but it feels like one, not because of the buildings or the streets, but because of the woman walking beside him, carrying pieces of a past he never thought he'd find. For the first time in years, Daniel feels like he's exactly where he's supposed to be,